what a crazy week this was. And I know that it's a little bit of a cliche now that every time when I start the intro of the MLS Matchweek review, I said that it's always a crazy week because there's some crazy event. But this week we had some really crazy thing that I definitely did not expect to happen. We had a couple of big upsets. We had probably the biggest upset of the season, which I of course will get to that one. And here's a hint, it involves that game. And we also had some missed opportunity by teams that is fighting for playoff position and dropping points when they could have took that opportunity to get some points against the other team that is in the playoff race that are dropping points. But either way, let's get into it, and we start off with Atlanta versus TFC, and for the third straight time, this game ends in a 2-2 draw. And Joseph Martinez, well, he's now one away from tying the record, and he's two away from breaking the record. And I really think at this point, whenever each team face Atlanta, they might as well just double or triple team Joseph Martinez, because this guy is just absolutely unstoppable. You can try anything and everything to stop in his way, but this guy just, he literally is Atlanta right now. I mean, he is literally the only guy. If you look at the last couple of goals, I think the only guy that has been scoring for Atlanta United in these last couple of goals and in these last couple of games has been Joseph Martinez. It is just absolutely incredible, and it's hard to believe that after all these games, teams still cannot find an answer to stop him. No matter how they knew coming into the game that Joseph Martinez is going to be the prime target and that Atlanta is just going to keep targeting him, and he always find a way to break out of that thing. And every time when teams try to stop him, he always finds a way to create an answer for that. And certainly he is on verge of probably breaking the records in the next game, because in the last couple of games he has scored a couple of brace, and if he score a brace in the next game, which means that it is the record for him. But overall in this game, TFC, well, I said before, I wasn't surprised the fact that if they do get a draw in this game, that of course is what's going to happen, and exactly they did. But in some way, it kind of did come with a price, and it shouldn't have come with a price, because right at the end of the game, in the 94th minute, Mavinga decided to kind of shove Gonzalo Perez in the face, and he got a straight red for that. And a straight red this week has been just really common, and red cards, especially late in the game, has been just very common. And there's also been a lot of pushing and shoving at the end of the game this week, more than I think you will ever see in a single week of an MLS match week. And this was just one of them, where there was just pushing and shoving, and Mavinga basically kind of shoved Gonzalo Perez in the face. And yes, I know that some people will say, well, Gonzalo Perez kind of being a little bit kind of dramatic by kind of falling to the ground, but still, you cannot do that, Mavinga. And now he is suspended for the next game, and that certainly is a big loss for TFC. And the next game for TFC is not going to get any easier, because they have to play against NYCFC. And, for Atlanta, I'm pretty sure they'll be very disappointed about this game, because they had this game in the bag, only to concede late in the game. Some Atlanta fans think the Ricketts goal was offside. I didn't think it was. I think he was onside. I think that was a good call by the linesman to not raise his flag. But yeah, certainly I think TFC will be happy about this result, besides the red card at the end of the game. And for Atlanta, this week they're kind of fortunate that a couple of the teams around them that is fighting for that Supporters' Shield race also kind of drop points, which I of course will talk about that as we go on this preview. And yeah, meanwhile, let's move on to the next game. And Montreal drew 1-1 to DC United. And the goals in this game, Mancuso scored in the 5th minute, and then Yamil Assad scored in the 70th to get the equalizer for DC United. This game was a game that looked like somebody just played FIFA 18. I mean, the amount of time that that both teams hit the post in this game is just, it's like FIFA 18 all over again. Like, if you guys have ever played FIFA 18, I'm pretty sure a lot of people plays it, and I obviously play it myself. You always get frustrated the fact that you always hit the post at least 2 or 3 times in the game. It's almost like the post is like the magnet, and that you always get to hit it at least once or twice. Well, in this game, that is exactly what happened. I mean, the post, I'm pretty sure at the end of the game, they might have to check if the post had some magnet or whatever, because both teams hit the post at least 2 times. And the total amount of the time that the ball hit the post, I'm guessing maybe 4 or 5 times it is. But the bottom line is, it was a lot. It was quite incredible to how many ball actually hits the post. And, you know, if those goals did not hit the post and gone into the back of the net, that would have been a very kind of different game. But in many ways, this is a big kind of 2-point drop for Montreal. You know, I said coming into this game, the impact, they need to win this one. And in many ways, you could say this is kind of a must-win for them, even though they're above the playoff line, because you're facing DC United at home, and you're facing a team that is not very good on the road, and you also have perhaps one of the easiest team in terms of the other teams that is fighting for that playoff spot in the Eastern Conference, and you drop points against them. I mean, that's really just inexcusable. And the fact that I was very surprised that Montreal wasn't able to get all 3 points, considering if you look at how they've been throughout the last couple of games, whenever they play against weak opponent like DC United, they're able to get the 3 points. So it's a bit surprised they didn't get the job done in this one. And for DC United, you know, they got a point in this game, but that still does not mean that they are back in the playoff race. I mean, you know, yeah, you get a point, but still, you know, the way that I'm seeing what DC United play, I think it's just a little bit too late for them to make a playoff race. Now, if they had got a couple of points, and if they kind of did this during the first half of the season where they had to go on the road, and that they got a couple of points and even got a couple of wins on the road, then yeah, sure, I think DC United will be in the race. But for now, I really still don't think DC will be able to get back in. And also, can we all agree that Wayne Rooney is kind of washed up, and that it's pretty clear that we knew I'm pretty sure DC United fan will now find a kind of realistic kind of realism that we'll see that Wayne Rooney is actually not going to make a big impact, and that he was only there just because he's only there because the front office for DC United just want to put people in the seat of their brand new stadium. So yeah, but moving on into the next match, and speaking of another team that had a big opportunity to get something in the playoff race, New England. They drew to Orlando City 3-3, and unlike the Montreal game, I don't know how the Revs did not win this one. I mean, for Montreal, you know, they did give away this equalizer, and they were kind of unlucky in terms of the times that they hit the post. In this game for New England, well, they led twice in this game. They blew a 2-0 lead in this game after Juan Aguilera and Christian Pineda score in the first 20 minutes, but then only for Dwyer and Tarek to push them back to level. And then Bunbury came off the bench and scoring a goal. It's interesting how in the preview I said that, you know, guys like Pineda and Bunbury are not really in their best form, and that you wonder, is the goal scoring that they've been doing so well this season is started to kind of like running a little bit dry, and that it is kind of like what we expect from them throughout this season, which is, you know, they're kind of like mediocre kind of striker, and they score in this game. And, you know, unfortunately, it wasn't enough because Scott Sutter scored his first goal for for Orlando City. And yeah, this is definitely a game that it feels like a loss for New England. And for New England, as of how bad they've been doing throughout these last couple months, I'm worried about this team. Like, this team is just, unlike other team around them where they have been very kind of inconsistent, New England have been just kind of on a downward trend right now ever since they got onto the peak of their point back in May. And it seemed like when the calendar month switched to June, they started to drop points, they started to lose games, and they started to blow late leads that they shouldn't be blowing. And this was just another one of them. And, I'm really worried about this Revs team. And I just feel like, of all the time where I said that back in May, I thought this team might make the playoffs with the way how they've been playing. Now it kind of feel like it isn't with the way that they are playing right now, and which is not very good. And as for Orlando City, well, I'm not quite sure they're going to be thrilled with a draw. And yes, they did come back twice in this game and score a dramatic late winner. But at the same time, the defense for Orlando City, yeah, another 3 goals give up. They're now up to 54 goals in terms of the goals that they have conceded throughout this season. And that is now still the most in MLS. And unless this defense does not get fixed, and unless if Orlando City are not going to use that money that they got back from Justin Miram and use that on the defense, this team has no chance of making the playoffs. I mean, this is a team that is kind of like, in some way, the LA Galaxy of the Eastern Conference, because this is a team that definitely have good attacking, but the defense is absolutely shocking. And it was shocking again, too. Like, the first 2 goals was just so preventable, and especially the second goal by Pineda. That was that goal that Orlando City conceded really reminds me of the Quakes in the first half of the season, where they just gave the ball away in the midfield. And yeah, I mean, that's just absolutely inexcusable. And I just think that they really need to think about getting a new center back and need to fix their back line a little bit. And also, by the way, Yoshiro Tune got a red card in the end of the game. And like I said earlier about the Mavinga red card, this was also very similar. There was a pushing and shoving, and then apparently Yotun got a red card of that kind of pushing and shoving that is gone on. And yeah, but now moving on to probably the most shocking result of the week. And I did make a video about this, and let's just say that video, I did not do a good job at it, and in some way I made a couple of mistakes in that video. Well, the first mistake I made was at the Jameer Hika goal. It was not a header. When I look back, it was a very similar goal to what Julian Green scored against France, and when I look at it, Jesse Gonzalez should have saved that. And then I also made a mistake by saying that in the first goal, when Vaco basically round Jesse Gonzalez, which again, I don't know why did Jesse Gonzalez came off his line so soon at doing that point, and that he had a FC Dallas defender beat. Well, I said that FC Dallas defender was actually Matt Beasler, which it's not Matt Beasler, it's Matt Hedges. I mean, yeah, I mean, to be fair, I will say this about that. Matt Beasler and Matt Hedges both are center backs for the respective team. Matt Hedges plays for FC Dallas and Matt Beasler plays for Sporting KCs. And, sometimes you do get them confused at a bit. And especially at that point, I was still very stunned, and I was still kind of like, almost like I just drank 10 bottles of beer and kind of like drunk and kind of start to make up things on my mind as I make the video. That can of course happen, but I'm definitely going to correct my mistake, and I even put in the comments below when people already told me the mistake that I made. But going back to this game, like I said, it was a a probably the biggest upset of this year. I mean, nobody, including myself, thought that this would be a win for the Quakes. I definitely did not think the Quakes were going to break their long winless streak against the best team in Western Conference. And heck, FC Dallas started their strongest squad in this game, and they coming into this game with a 17-game unbeaten streak at home, and yet somehow, in some way, they lose this one. And really, like I said, with Jesse Gonzalez, he was absolutely horrendous, and he just basically gifted us the first 2 goals. And also, another guy that I didn't mention might be also at fault for this loss for FC Dallas is Christian Coman. I mean, holy crap, how awful was he going for? Like, he couldn't even finish a single shot if life depends on it. I mean, there was so many chances where he could have put the ball into the back of the net, and he just did not do that. I mean, I don't know exactly what happened to Coman. I mean, Coman used to be one of the best player for FC Dallas a couple of years ago, and he had a bad year last season, which is not a surprise because pretty much a lot of the FC Dallas player had a bad year during that massive collapse in the second half of the season. But even coming into this season, he was absolutely awful. And the fact that at the end of the day, seeing FC Dallas lose this one, this was definitely not expected, and that this might be a big blow in terms of them potentially getting into the Supporters' Shield race, because with this loss, they lose ground to Atlanta, who draw this weekend, and they had a chance to even close the gap on Atlanta and put the pressure on them for the Supporters' Shield race, and they just did not do that. And now they have to worry about another team that is in second place, which I said it was LAFC that they might have to worry for that top spot. Oh no, it's now Portland Timbers that they got to worry about. And the Timbers actually have 2 games in hand over FC Dallas. So theoretically, if the Timbers does win those 2 games, then the Timbers would be in the top spot of the Western Conference. I mean, oh, how things change in just a match day. But like I said, with this win, it's a good win for the Quakes, I guess. But at the same time, I still don't think they're gonna make the playoffs. I think this is just a win where it just really puts the winless run and just put that off the shoulder of many of these players, and hopefully this will at least give the players a little bit confident and at least try to finish the season strong. And yeah, we're gonna see how they do when they do play against the Rapids, and that obviously is another game where we could potentially get a win. But moving on into the next one, Minnesota, they lose this game against the Sounders, and this might be a season-ending and a playoff-crushing loss for the Loons. And the reason why I say that is that I said in the preview that the Loons have to win this game against the Sounders, because after this game they have to go on this murderous 5-game road trip where they have to play some very good team like RSL, Sporting KC, the Galaxy, FC Dallas, and if they want to potentially make the playoffs, they got to win the rest of the home game. And it looked like they were going to do that, but unfortunately they gave away a penalty to Nicolas Ladero. It was a bit of a controversial penalty because it looked like that it wasn't really like a hand ball when that ball was kind of like popped out and one of the Minnesota United player handballed it. But to be honest, earlier in the game, Seattle probably could have had a penalty when one of the Loons player also dived down to basically try to block the shot, but the ball actually hit the hand of that player. And there's been a couple of times that has been called a penalty, but the biggest blow to them is right here in the 97th minute with Will Bruin scoring the goal. And yeah, that's 3 points dropped for Minnesota. And I just think that as much as Minnesota fans will kind of be angry that the ref kind of ruins their season, you can't blame on the goal that they concede in the 97th minute. I mean, Yeah, I I I really think that if Minnesota still have a chance to make the playoffs, they're gonna have to do something that they have not done very well this season, which is win on the road. Because unless in this 5 game stretch where they have to go on the road, if they do not get at least 1 or 2 wins or get a couple of points up on the board, then yeah, unfortunately, this team is done. And keep in mind, coming back from that 5 game road trip, their next home game is against the Portland Timbers. And that obviously is not going to get very easy because the Timbers are in a unbeaten run that is right now the longest in MLS, and also a getting to a very historic kind of unbeaten streak, which of course we'll talk about that when I get to this game. But as for Seattle, well, you better believe that this team is making their traditional kind of second half revival that they've always been doing for the last couple of seasons. And what's interesting about this revival is that nobody, including myself, think that they're gonna do it. And when you look at how this team is and the way that this team kind of operates, you don't think that they would make a revival. I mean, this team is just so old in terms of their core player and just so slow that you wouldn't think that they should be thinking about making a revival and instead just kind of tear it down. And I even said it myself. I feel like they need to think about rebuilding because their core player are just aging really badly, and that they need a new kind of change. But they're still finding a way to win games, and I think that is probably the reason why the revival has happened. This is a team that does not play beautiful soccer, and in many ways I think this team kind of reminds me the Jose Mourinho kind of team, where they tends to sit back a lot and they tends to somehow nick a goal there and somehow find a way to win games. And at the end of the day, if that is a winning formula, then I think the Sounders will have no problem to stick with it. I mean, I'm pretty sure not a lot of fans are happy with the way that they play, and I'm pretty sure the Sounders fans are not happy with the boring kind of football that they do. But hey, if you get 3 points at the end of the day and you play this negative football, nobody would care if you are playing boring football, because at the end of the day, even if you play good football and you play beautiful football, if you're not getting a result, it really does not matter either way. The result is always the most important thing, and that is what the Sounders are doing so far. And I think they're now just 5 or 4 points below the red line. They are coming in a very kind of fast way. But moving on into the next game, and their Cascadia neighbor also got a big result, and Vancouver, of course, got a draw against NYCFC. And NYCFC, these last couple of games have not looked good. And I know in this game, probably the reason why they didn't look very good is because they really missed Sean Johnson in this game. Apparently, Sean Johnson picked up an injury doing the warm-up, and then they had to get their backup goalkeeper in this game, kind of an emergency start. And let's just say he was nowhere near as good, and probably in some of the goals that Vancouver scored, he probably could have saved it. I think maybe the Mosqueda goal in the first one, that was just a great goal by Mosqueda. But the Hurtado goal, when the ball was kind of like up in the air, he basically just hesitated it and then decided to not catch that one. And yeah, I mean, when you do that, that usually does not end up very well. Although at the same time, I think that also is kind of poor marking for NYCFC, because how in the world did Hurtado got wide open right there on the right side? And really, NYCFC, again, they were very poor in this game, and right now this feels like deja vu all over again for NYCFC, and that is them falling behind the Supporter Shield race, and that they're probably not going to win it again. And this week they had an opportunity to capitalize, considering the fact that Atlanta was playing a a tough team, and they're playing against a Whitecaps team that are not very good, but they didn't. They didn't capitalize on that, and because of that, I really think that they could be missing out of the Supporters' Shield for the second year in a row. But as for Vancouver, this is a massive road kind of draw, and in many ways, I definitely did not expect Vancouver to get a draw in this game, and I'm pretty sure when they put the starting 11 and when Carl Robinson decided to go mostly with his reserve in this game, that makes me even more kind of just convince myself that they're not going to get a result. NYCFC is going to got this one in the bag, and yet somehow they find a way to draw this game, and they might have lost a couple of ground on the team that is above the red line, which is RSL, who won this week, and then they lost a couple of ground to the team below, like Seattle. But when you get a big result away against one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference, that is definitely a big result. And, I think if you look back at the end of the season, if Vancouver does make the playoffs, then this could be one of those games that they look back as one of the games that is the reason why they made the playoffs. But moving on into the next one, and another shocking result. Colorado beat the Galaxy 2-1. And I know that there are a lot of people that commented in most of the MLS highlights, and they said that they cannot believe Colorado and San Jose won the same week. I mean, if you would have told me at any part of the season that the Rapids and the Quakes would get a win against some of the best team in the Western Conference in the same week, and probably the top 14 in the Western Conference in the same week, I would have just laughed at you. I would think, what kind of world are you living in? But here we are, with the Quakes beating the best team in the Western Conference, and Colorado beating a team that has a 9-game unbeaten streak coming into this game and snapping it by the end of the 90 minutes. That is certainly an impressive win. And how about Kellen Acosta? I mean, I said before that doing that Acosta and Bocce kind of trade that FC Dallas and Colorado was interact, I thought this was definitely a huge move for Colorado, and this definitely will really help them out in terms of the midfield. And what do you know? In these first 2 games, he has already made some instant impact, already scored 2 goals for his new club, while Domenico Bocce hasn't even been in the starting 11 for FC Dallas. So I think the Rapids, for once, they might be actually celebrating that they actually got the trade with other team, and they got on the good end part of the trade. And, the other goals in this game was Sam Nicholson. And also notice how both of the goals scored for Colorado were players that just arrived during the midseason. I mean, Nicholson arrived from Minnesota, I think back in May, and Acosta just arrived a couple of weeks ago. So, yeah, this is definitely... The Rapids, despite the fact of how poor they've been doing in terms of their off-season and how they brought so many of these championship players into the squad, and it just seemed like it hasn't really worked out for them. Now that they decided to not use that way as a way to revive their squad and revive their team, and instead getting guys in MLS, and now that it's been successful, then maybe they're going to use that formula in the future of just getting other MLS players and getting trade with other MLS club for some decent player, and maybe that of course will work out. And it's just one thing that I always want the Quakes front office to do. I don't know why do they always tend to go other places where you have these unproven players that comes into MLS and you don't know what it's gonna do, when you could have just gone to look in MLS and look into other player around the league and pick out those players that are definitely proven to be successful. And that's what Colorado has done with Acosta. He's definitely a proven kind of success in MLS, and he is definitely showing that revive after a bit of a poor start of the season when he was with Dallas. And as for the Galaxy, well, this is bad. I mean, this defense that I talked about, and I kind of made a comparison with the Orlando City kind of defense. It's very similar. I mean, the defense for the Galaxy is just paper thin. Like, the 2 goals that they concede are just basically defensive mistake, and if this team does not fix that problem, then this could be a team that is going to be going into the playoffs, and they are going to be one and done. They are not going to be going deep and make a run in the playoffs with the way how they're playing. And also the fact that their creativity in the midfield is not very good in this game. And who knew that not having Zlatan in there was not going to help this Galaxy team. But yeah, moving on into the next one. And this is probably the game that I'm pretty sure a lot of people will talk about in terms of the amount of red cards there was. I mean, Houston had 3 player sent off in this game. I don't actually remember the last time that we actually had a game where a team had 3 players sent off and that a team actually went down to 8 man. The only time I remember a team actually went down to like 8 man or even 7 man was a couple of years ago in the US Open Cup between the Timbers and the Sounders, and basically that was a game where I think it was the Sounders that got 7, or not 7 men, but they got 2 men sent off, and there was also 2 injured player from that game, and they were kind of like out of sub when those 2 players got injured, so they went down to like 7 men. And that was also a game where Clint Dempsey made kind of like a sarcastic kind of clap to the referee, and that he got a long suspension in the US Open Cup competition. And yeah, that was the only time I remember there's been that many players that got sent off. And I think a lot of people will talk more about this first sending off than the last 2 sending off. The last 2 sending off, once again, it was basically a pushing and shuffling. Things were kind of got out of control. And, you know, when that happened, usually sometime referee will have to show a red card to players. But the first one, that is a very debatable kind of red card. And I have already heard both sides of the story. And when I look at it, and I know this is probably going to be an unpopular opinion, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to get the hate in the comment section, I don't think that's a red card. And the reason why I don't think that's a red card is that as much as people said that, well, it was a reckless play that he kind of like just barged him into his head, well, I just think that was kind of a rough kind of shoulder-to-shoulder challenge, and that I also think that when he was trying to do that, he was trying to maybe win the ball, and that he was trying to kind of do a shoulder to shoulder challenge to the Sporting KC player, and unfortunately he kind of got it wrong. And in many ways, I still think that probably could have been a yellow card in my book, but in my opinion, I've seen a couple of times where we had some shoulder-to-shoulder challenge like that, and I have seen some more reckless play than that incident. So I think that's not a red card, and you're welcome to disagree with me in the comments below, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get dislike in this video because of that. But at the end of the day, you know, I said it before with MLS and how there's just been so many controversial play, and there's just been so many debatable play, that it kind of really split the fans in terms of their interpretation of what is a foul and what is not a foul. And, you know, I even made a video talking about the pro refereeing, and just, you know, unless they fix the system, and unless they do something about this refereeing stuff, we're just going to continue to have those ones. And it's sad that we continue to have these kind of kind of incident, and that, it's sad that that is probably the main reason MLS is not being kind of credible as perhaps one of the best league in the world, and that a lot of people call this league a joke, is because of how bad the refereeing job is. I mean, it is incredibly bad. And, I wouldn't say this one would be the one that is the reason why Houston lost to Sporting KC. I still think that game between the Dynamo and the Union, that one kind of really cost the Dynamo. I mean, that sending off was clearly not a sending off, but this one, it could be definitely debatable. And Houston, even though they were down to 10 men, they were still looking pretty decent. I mean, Sporting KC didn't really look very well in this game, and eventually they did get the goal in the 74th minute. I wrote that the 14th minute, but I've got this little tick mark here. It's actually the 74th minute, and who would have thought that the guy that was involved with that controversial play when Fudemeyer basically shoved this guy called Buziel, who made his debut for Sporting KC, turns out to make the winning assist. And for those of you that don't know who Buziel is, he is a 16-year-old from Sporting KC, and I think he came out of the academy. And it's quite incredible that Peter Vermes decided to put that young of a player to there. I think it shows how Sporting KC are just so desperate that they need to bring in some new guys to try to fix this death spiral that they've been occurring in these last couple of weeks. But it definitely worked out perfectly because it was a lovely pass to Diego Rubio. Rubio basically puts it into the back of the net, and this is a massive win for Sporting KC because, like I said, the death spiral, it looked like it was going to go out of control, and it looked like it was going to be something similar to what we saw with FC Dallas last season, but they kind of stopped that death spiral as of now. But still, I think for Sporting KC, and especially the way that they play in this game, even when they were up to 10 men, they didn't look very comfortable whatsoever. And I think this just explains how bad Sporting KC has got in these last couple of months, and how the form of these players, and how most of these players just do not have the same confidence that they had in the first couple of months when they were winning games and they were just having fun and stuff like that. And as for Houston, this is definitely a huge loss at home, and I'm not quite sure in the US Open Cup in the semifinal will the suspension actually roll over into it, because if it does, then this is big kind of loss for Houston. Like, they're going to lose Fulmeyer, Serin, and Elise is probably the biggest loss if this one actually rolls over into the Open Cup. And it was kind of interesting that Wilmer Cabrera, which he was also another well, I wouldn't say player, but he was another manager that got sent off in this game, decided to put in a very strong squad considering the fact that they do have to play that important midweek US Open Cup semifinal against LAFC. But I guess this game is also very important for them, because this is a game that they're playing one of the team that is kind of I wouldn't say a big rival, but it's kind of the team that they've been facing each other whenever they face big kind of circumstances. And with Houston losing another home game, they got to start figuring it out in terms of going on the road to win some game, because right now I think if this Houston team does not win games on the road and do not get points on the road, this team is going to miss the playoffs this season. But moving on into the last free game, I'm just going to quickly quickly talk about these last free game, because some of them are pretty obvious. Resort, and as much as this week there was a lot of different surprising kind of resort, these last couple of games there wasn't really much surprise. RSL, as you expected, they got a win at home against a kind of free-falling kind of Chicago Fire team. Krylak with the brace in this game. Schweinsteiger got the only goal for Chicago, and yeah, certainly this is a good win for RSL. It's a win that they should be getting in this one, considering the fact that they're facing a Fire team that have now lost 6 in a row. And this is a Fire team that is now in 10th in the Eastern Conference, and they could potentially finish dead last if they continue this bad run. And this was a team that was actually in the playoffs and in the above the red line just a couple of months ago. And again, oh well, how things have changed in these last couple of weeks. And then of course Portland extend their historic kind of unbeaten streak to 15 games with 3-0 win against the Union. It's historic because that actually, I think that ties with their longest unbeaten streak that they ever had in club history. And this game, it wasn't really so straightforward for the Timbers. They did kind of have to wait until the second half to finally get going. Eventually, when they did get going, they scored those crucial goals with Valeri, Aspira, and Guzman scoring those goals. And for the Union, this was a game that I knew they were probably not gonna win, mainly because one, they're playing against a Timbers team that has this unbeaten streak, and two, the Union has a U.S. Open Cup game, and they have a U.S. Open Cup semifinal game against the Chicago Fire, and I'm pretty sure Jim Curtin want to put a very weak squad for this game, knowing that for sure that they're probably not gonna win this one, and that they might as well just kind of shift their priority into the U.S. Open Cup for now. And yeah, I mean, I don't think if you're a Union fan, you need to be upset about this result because you kind of expected this to happen. But I'm pretty sure you will be really upset if you aren't able to beat the Chicago Fire in that U.S. Open Cup semifinal, which, yeah, that is a very kind of weird U.S. Open Cup semifinal, because here you got Chicago in this really bad kind of run and they haven't won a game in forever, and then you have the Union team that haven't looked decent this season either, and they had to now fly all the way across the other side of the country and back home to play this game. That's kind of a weird semifinal game, but hey, the winner of that game will be going to the final, and most likely, I really think in that Houston versus LAFC game, whoever wins that one potentially could be unofficially won the U.S. Open Cup. I mean, I know it's too early to say that, if you look at two of the matchup, one of the matchup between the Fire and the Union, whoever going to get to the final are just going to get smoked in the final to whoever team they face. But it's pretty clear that if you look at the 4 teams remaining in that competition, those 2 teams are by far the weakest team, and I don't know how both of those teams are actually in that position. I mean, you would think that the Red Bulls or TFC not TFC because TFC doesn't play. They're in Canada. They play in the Canadian Championship. But you would think teams like NYCFC, the Red Bulls, Atlanta, those were the team that could potentially get into the semifinal. But no, instead you have 2 teams that is near the bottom of the Eastern Conference fighting out to the U.S. Open Cup final, and I think that is probably the beauty of the U.S. Open Cup. You have smaller teams that probably are not going to do much this season or maybe even make it to the playoffs, but they still have a chance to potentially get to a cup final and potentially win a cup final. But moving on into the last game, the Red Bulls, of course, win 2-1 against LAFC. Royer with the brace in this game. Diego Rossi finally scoring a goal in this game. He's been enduring a pretty long goal drought in these last couple of games, but he finally break that. But unfortunately for his team, LAFC, it was not good enough. And for LAFC, I was kind of in some way surprised that they actually decided to go with a bit of a strong squad, considering the fact that they do have that U.S. Open Cup game in midweek. But they did go with a strong squad, and they, it didn't really pay off to them because they dropped all 3 points in this game. And I really think the difference maker in this game for the Red Bulls was really Luis Robles, who basically decide to become Manuel Neuer, and this is not just me kind of making a analogy to Manuel Neuer. He was really Manuel Neuer with the way that he was playing almost like a sweeper keeper. He was just stopping every kind of LAFC attack, even go out of his lines, to come off his lines, to go into near the outfield to try to tackle a couple of the LAFC players so that they can get the dangers away. I mean, that is just a true kind of sweeper keeper kind of role. But yeah, certainly this is a big win for the Red Bulls, and I'm pretty sure this is they probably are the big winner in terms of the Supporters Shield race, because while other teams like NYCFC, FC Dallas, and Atlanta either drew or win, they of course won their game, and now they gain ground on those teams. And I think the Red Bulls are only now 4 points behind Atlanta, and they have 2 games in hands of Atlanta. So if they win both of those games, they would be passing Atlanta for that Supporters Shield racing. But yeah, that of course is this week action done and dusted. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Obviously, things are heating up in terms of the playoff race and the Supporters Shield standings, and I'm of course going to continue to talk about that as we get near the end of the season. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. I'll do the power rankings tomorrow. And yeah, I will see you guys next time.